Thank you all for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Nick, and I'm one of the events hosts here at Powell's Books. Before we begin, I want to remind you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. And if you don't already do so, please consider following us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Tonight, we are excited to welcome Bethany C Morrow and LL McKinney. Bethany C Morrow is an independent best-selling author who writes for adult and young adult audiences in genres ranging from speculative literary to contemporary fantasy to historical. She is the author of the novels Mem and A Song Below Water, and editor-contributor to the young adult anthology Take the Mic, which was the 2020 ILA Social Justice in Literature Award winner. Her work has been chosen as Indies Introduced and Indie Next Picks and featured in the LA Times, Forbes, Bustle, BuzzFeed, and more. Morrow's new novel, A Chorus Rises, is a timely confrontation of the evolving nature of popularity in a society that chooses exceptions and rewards model minorities. Teen influencer Naema Bradshaw has it all. She's famous, stylish, gorgeous, and she's an Eloko, a charismatic person gifted with a melody that people adore. Everyone loves her until she's cast as the villain who exposed a Siren to the whole world. Dragged by the media and canceled by her fans, no one understands her side, not her boyfriend, not her friends, not even her fellow Eloko. Vilified by those closest to her, Naema heads to the Southwest, where she's determined to stage a comeback to her family, her real self, and the truth about her magic. What she finds is a new community and a flourishing group of online fans who support her. At first, it feels like it used to, the fandom, the adoration, the community that takes her side. But when her online advocates start targeting other Black girls, Naema will realize that for Black girls like her, even the privilege of fame has its limits, and only Naema can discover the true purpose of her power and how to use it. Joining Morrow in conversation tonight is LL McKinney, named one of the Root's 100 most influential African Americans of 2020. LL McKinney is an advocate for equality and inclusion in publishing and the creator of the hashtags Publishing Paid Me and What WOC Writers Hear. Her works include the Nightmare verse books, Nubia, Real One, through DC, Marvel's Black Widow, Bad Blood, and more. So this evening's event will include an audience Q&A. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you would like to ask a question. As well, if someone has typed a question you'd also like to know the answer to, please upvote that particular question by clicking the thumbs up button. More importantly, please consider supporting Bethany and Powell's by purchasing a copy of her new book from us. A link to buy A Chorus Rises along with LL's books will be shared in the chat a couple times throughout this evening. Bethany, LL, we're thrilled to welcome you both, and thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited because I love this book and I love this woman. So let's do this. Okay. So you already know how I feel about A Chorus Rises. I'm going to let y'all know how I feel about A Chorus Rises. I read this book in under 24 hours, and all I did was text Bethany very stressed out emojis and gifs the entire time, as well as all caps responses. So we don't get into it. So we heard what the book was about. Well, not what it was about, what happens in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what the book is about, which is a completely different answer.
Right.
What is the book about? I know what it's about, but tell the people what it is.
Right. So the way to tell you what this book is about is to start by telling you why I wrote this book, because A Song Below Water is its predecessor, and it is about two sister friends living in an alternate Portland, Oregon, where magical creatures exist and sirens are exclusively Black girls. And one of our two protagonists in that book is a siren, which means that her identity has to be protected and kept secret because her power is disliked by the world, of course. I was not being subtle. I'm talking about the fact that Black women are powerful, that our voices are powerful, that our society likes to consume and appropriate and imitate, all while trying to actually eradicate us, all while trying to erase us. So she has a sister friend who is also turning into something named Effie, and the book is really about Black sisterhood, specifically Black sisterhood, being life-saving. And both girls are going through something pretty traumatic and have gone through something pretty traumatic. And I realize that that can be the most comfortable Black girl for people to root for is, but I already see you looking away, looking to the side, like you already knew where we were going. You already knew where we were going now. It's the appropriate protagonist. It's the appropriate victim. I know that there is more to Effie and Tavia than that. I adore these girls, but the way that I know that's what was happening is there's not 2 Black girls in that story. There were 3, and one of them is named Naema. And in a story about what it is to be a Black girl in America, immediately people started talking about how they hated Naema and how Naema was the antagonist and how Naema was the villain. And I immediately left my body, just rage departed from my body, just rage astral projected, because I was like, how did you just take a story about white supremacy, like about the literal, environmental villainry of living in a primarily white setting and living in a white supremacist society, and how did you identify that the villain in that story was a 16-year-old Black girl? So I had no intention of writing a follow-up to A Song Below Water. It's kind of like expressly what I don't do is sort of write, and I still didn't write the same sort of story. It's the same genre technically, but I think when you read it, it'll be very obvious that these stories do not follow the same sort of path. If a genre had a formula, they don't adhere to it. It's a very, very different story. But my point was, you're not going to act like I sacrificially gave you a Black girl to hate because you always need a Black girl to hate. That's what we did not do in A Song Below Water. So the next story for me was very obviously going to be Naema and who she is and how difficult it would be to have thought that the world was on your side and knew who you were, and to find out that it's only ever been about one or the other of you can have our positive attention, but not both. And what it means to continue to love yourself and continue to be just a very self-possessed and self-aware. And, this is a girl who quite frankly loves herself and is very, very much the type of messages that you get that is like, oh, this is just a strong girl. And then you find out that if that girl is Black, then all of those things are very unattractive, and nobody actually wants you to love yourself that much. Nobody wants you to be proud of yourself and refuse to bow down. So what it expressly is not as well is a redemption story. And I feel like you already know that, but just to put that out there for everyone.
Okay, so what I need you to do is stop answering the questions I'm going to ask. Because that's what you're doing. You are answering the questions I'm going to ask, and I'm here. Let's just have this conversation, So I'm in the beginning of the book, right? And we're seeing the end of A Song Below Water through Naema's experience with that. And I felt everything of what you just said on those pages, because like the blurb says, and like you talk about your frustration with how people were taking this from your first book, with how there can't be one good magical Black girl, good as in acceptable, like you were saying. There can't be more than one. We can only have one at a time. And so one has to be pushed out of violently out of the way.
Always violently.
Violently pushed out of the way. Like, this is very harmful and very traumatizing. So I want to talk more about what you put into Naema, both in Song Below Water, because that then flourishes in A Chorus Rises. What about Naema do you want readers to not necessarily connect with, but you want them to understand? Because it seems like they were very much themselves also pushing aside this Black girl and everything she embodied, especially with how she loved herself, with how she put herself first in the situation, and knowing what I have read from this book and going back and remembering scenes from the first book, how just on the flip side, a great quote that you told me is, how the hero in somebody's story is the villain in someone else's, So I want to know what you want people to get from Naema, because people can learn from Naema and her experience without her being a teachable moment.
You know that what you're going to get from Naema is Naema, and what you do with that is up to you. Like, Naema is not going to change because you get upset or because you decide her moment in the sun is over. And I'm only ever thinking of really what I want my Black girls to take from Naema. Naema knew what the situation was the entire time. So she doesn't go through a moment where the gaslighting actually like gets to her and she starts doubting herself. One thing that you're not going to see is Naema start doubting herself because you lied on her. Like, that's not what's going to happen. The interesting thing is Naema was like, I thought we were allowed to not get along with people. Like, I thought, because if you go back, and I said this before I even wrote Naema, when I started hearing people saying things, I was like, before prom, what did Naema do? Like, what did she do to her? These are people who don't get along. We see that dynamic in high school dramas all of the time. You simply don't jive with somebody. What we do know is that Naema has always been in the network, which means she has always been protecting Tavia's secret. What we continuously see is people, including, and listen, I'm not throwing the other girls under the bus. It's literally, if you write full and complete people, they will misinterpret things. They will make mistakes. It is perfectly fine to say that Tavia and Effie made a mistake of just really going too hard in this idea that like Naema was this antagonist constantly just because she wasn't really concerned with being nice all of the time or being nice to them in particular. And you see that if you look back at the events of the first book, particularly everything before the prom, you just see a girl who thinks that we're verbally sparring. That's
essentially, I love this about this book and about your characters in general between these two books, because we get to see a dynamic that we talk about. And when I say we, I'm going to just put it up there. I mean, Black people, that we talk about how you can't argue in front of company because of how they're going to act. Right. If you're arguing and you have a legitimate reason to have beef with somebody, and they have a legitimate reason to have beef with you because, like you said, people, right? Somebody on the outside looking in, as what happens with Naema, they take sides in something that requires no one to be coming in and trying to white knight for somebody or trying to bury somebody else. So I want to, because you speak not only on, and I say you speak, but you wrote not only about this, but you wrote about other issues such as how people looking like they're trying to help one particular person who might have a privilege that they jive with, but it makes those people go against an entire demographic, including the person they're trying to support.
It tells on them. They tell on themselves, right? And
all the time.
This is one of the things that I say about, we've talked about this before, and especially when I could not stop talking about Tiffany D. Jackson's Grown. We talk about the adultification of Black girls. We talk about the way that one of the things that I realized is people really expect every teenage Black girl to be a sociology professor. Okay, like Naema was supposed to know right off the bat that no, they didn't really love you. I'm sorry. Well, if I love me and you act like you love me, I was supposed to know that you didn't really love me and that this was all a shield for your problematic feelings for other people. And you had room to allow for one exception to that. But so we see a Black girl who is getting stuff very wrong in terms of the way she's interpreting the world. And it's not her fault. She's literally a product of this socialization process. And then you're going to be upset that she took some things at face value because she's a teenager, she's a literal child, and really believed that like we can really talk about this from face value. I can accept these people's adoration, and I don't have to interrogate it because they love me because I'm Eloko, without realizing that all of those people were operating from a place of a very like anti-Black and misogynoirist perspective, as is always the case. It's never about hurting our feelings. It's literally about harming us. It's literally about eradicating us. So one of the things that I feel like is super duper important is you see her, if anybody you meet in someone else's story, you have not met.
And I love how you just brought it up as well, how we have this girl, this Black girl, who believes these things at face value. And this is essentially how people want the world to actually be, while ignoring the other side. So what gets me about Naema and her being taken in by these people who's like, I love me, so why wouldn't you love me, is that it's that surface level that a lot of people try to force onto the entire conversation. Well, I don't see color, or this isn't important, it's this first. These different aspects outside of your Blackness that we admire. We can tolerate your Blackness because of this privilege right here. And I love how it's so beautifully done with Naema, how not only is she like, oh, no, you don't get to piecemeal me out. We're not about to do that. In the process, we don't really see this. You don't let it happen reverse where people were making Naema the bad guy. We don't see that happen with Tavia. You don't even have that here, where Naema is, of course, upset, but at no point is Tavia the antagonist. It's still white supremacy. It's still those systems that are in place. So I'm trying to frame these questions because I don't want to give away spoilers. Let's talk a little bit about the Knights, the group that Naema finds filling that hole where her friends aren't on her side and her boyfriend's not on her side. I want to talk about how the world seemed to throw her away so easily, because that's what happened. She no longer served a purpose for them, and they found someone else who, like you said, fit the bill to lift up. So I want to talk about how something that can be disguised as, oh, I'm on your side, can actually be turned around and used as where they try and use having known you, or it's almost like I like this Black person, so I can't be racist.
You know what you're asking.
I know what I'm trying. So listen,
look, because
I'm trying not to say too much about this book, and I'll probably sound ridiculous.
I'm gonna invoke a name, and I want to be really careful with, again, because we're talking in mixed company right now. I want to be really careful why, in a world that is contemporary and is our modern world, I don't just go, here's a one-to-one, this is an allegory, because it's really not. But there will always be people who, if you are the marginalized, especially systemically, especially for centuries at a time, especially, we're talking about degradation down to owning bodies, breaking bodies, brutalizing bodies, destroying family connections, displacing people. We're talking about then Jim Crow. We're talking about bombing people in their homes, in their country, and the whole country telling you didn't see what you just saw. If all of that happens over and over and over for centuries and centuries, for generations and generations, you don't get to act surprised when it produces the singular personality that it's trying to produce, which is a Candace Owens, which is a Herman Cain, which is a, look, and I'm going to be very careful with the way that I say this, because I am never as upset at them as I am at white supremacy. You don't get to be surprised when someone is the desired outcome of a centuries-long campaign, when they are willing to tap dance or shuck and jive, or whatever we actually usually say. You don't get to be more upset at that person than you are at the system that created this identity. And Naema is not even that identity, because she's a child, and she just literally believed you at your word. She just literally took you at your word that this was why you loved her. And as soon as she gets hip to the fact that that's not what it is, she's going to do something about it, right? So, but I think it's difficult to have conversations in mixed company, even about very obvious examples like that, because while there will always be those few personalities that perfectly result from oppression, there will always be an extremely overtly white supremacist party or organization or system that is looking for those exact people to put in front of them. I am going to make sure that I have a Candace Owens on my bill. I'm not going to pay her like I pay my stable of blonde Fox News people. I'm not going to respect her the same way. I'm not going to, and when I defend her, it will only be so that she can continue to her purpose. But you will always find people being trotted out. We say this in the Black community all the time. Oh, they trotted out their Black person. They trotted out their, because if you got to put a face on something and you want to, what you think is immediately discredit a conversation about systemic racism and oppression, the easiest way is it's like the same when somebody's like, well, actually my partner is Black. Girl, that means nothing to me. What that doesn't disprove, we have lived in this country together since the inception of this country. We have always had relationships, usually forcibly, with people who don't really want us to be liberated. So that means absolutely nothing. But the point of that is to discredit the people, those of us who are seeing what's happening and are trying to describe what's actually happening. You're making sure that you keep a couple of these people around so that you can say, well, see, that can't be what I'm doing, because it can't be racism that's making me go after sirens who are only Black women, because my favorite Eloko is this Black girl. Yeah, but she's your favorite Eloko because she's your shield. Like, and the reason it works is the same reason I will be interested to see what this book does, because this book, A Song Below Water, to me is not exactly 101, but it's not too far ahead of it where people haven't been able to, and I'm, mean white people, haven't been able to get it. But Naema was a direct reaction, was a direct response, was a direct, like, okay, we need to go further in this discourse. So Naema is not 101 in any way, shape, or form. I will be super interested to see what happens with this book, because it's challenging the very, that's if you want white supremacy to thrive, you have to have shields. You have to have Black people who look like they agree with you. And it never gets talked about because we are effectively shut up by somebody using the shield, right? So to just call out the shield and just this is what you do, you use shields, is, we'll see. Are we ready? Are we ready for that conversation? Are we ready for the discourse to not be 101? I mean, we'll see.
Because again, it comes back to how arguing in front of company. because when you say, hey, y'all, you're doing the thing where white supremacy is using you to hurt your people, let's not do that. Even if it's just a discussion, like you said, people on the outside are going to pick sides and they're going to utilize what's going on to combat the viewpoint that they disagree with. And both Naema, the character, and the book refuse to be used against someone else, even someone that they don't disagree with. And I think it's beautiful with what you do with Naema because she loves herself. She puts herself first. She does all of this unapologetically, unabashedly. Like, it's clearly this is why the world turns, and we're just going to keep doing it because you all have me to thank now for this. God, I love this girl. But at no point does she believe the hype that other people are trying to utilize to hurt Tavia and other Black women. When she recognizes that, she shuts it down immediately. And I'm wondering if you think this book being beyond the 101 can be used to help facilitate those types of discussions, or for those people to sort of have those discussions with themselves. Because you said, again, you're writing always predominantly towards Black girls, to be like, it's okay to think these things and to have thought these things and then come out of it. You're not the villain just because you're arguing with someone else, just because you want to put yourself first, just because someone else tries to paint you that way. I'm really interested to see the conversation you want to have, you want the book to have with the reader, and the reader potentially to have with themselves behind this, because I had a whole conversation with myself.
You had a whole conversation with me. I got the text message.
I did. Okay, so I had a conversation with me and with Bethany, but it was mostly me in all caps, but it's okay.
No, but the thing about her putting herself first, even, the problem is a lot of times as Black women, we are using language that other people think they understand.
There you go.
They think we're saying the same thing. And we have such a breadth and a richness of experience and understanding of community, and that we don't actually mean the same thing. So if somebody else said, I'm putting myself first. If a non-Black, look, I'm gonna be real. Can I just be really honest for a second?
I mean, selfish and self-love sound the same to certain people for a reason, but go right it. I mean,
you already said it. I love how you're like, go ahead and say it. I'm gonna say it before you say it, but go ahead and say it. No, so the issue is, if I hear a non-Black woman, specifically Black woman, okay, I'm not saying woman of color, I'm not saying people of color, I'm being very specific because this is what I'm talking about. If I hear a non-Black woman say, I'm gonna put myself first, that's an alert to me that I'm probably about to be abused. Like that my time and investment and all that kind of stuff is about to go unrewarded. When a Black woman says, I'm gonna put myself first, never does it cross my mind that she means to your detriment. Never does it cross my mind that her idea of putting herself first is in complete isolation to a community, because it's just not, that's not the world, that's not reality. So even when we say Naema puts herself first, and I say this too, we know what we don't mean, because she's been putting herself first the entire time, and she's been in the network the entire time. She's been protecting Tavia the entire time. She's been putting herself first. So putting yourself first means first ahead of the messages that this society keeps trying to impress upon you. First means I'm going to protect myself because I know that this world is not going to protect me at this point. So I'm going to put myself first. Does that mean I'm going to leave you to your doom to do that? No. Does that mean I can't protect you and care about you and look out for you as well? No, it doesn't.
We
so
also know that
she does that.
Protecting someone else does put me first in some ways as well. Like,
especially within Black sisterhood, of course it does. Protecting Black women protects me. Look.
Okay. I want to step back for a second. We gonna leave Candace Owens and Stacey Dash where they is.
Look, and I don't want anybody to go away from here being like, oh my gosh, she said such and such about, because that's what they always want to do. I said it so that you understand that they are the product of an intentional socialization.
So let's be angry at this socialization. Let's turn
Thank you.
the efforts and the attention towards that. I want to be a little light for a second, because this book was also about connecting with your roots and your ancestry, and you beautifully elaborated on the magic and what it means to have that magic questioned by someone who has no idea what they're talking about, but because they have an idea of what they're talking about something else, people automatically assume, oh, well, they're going to know more about you than you know about yourself, just because they know about that over there, which happens a lot with Black people and Black women and femmes in particular, is that I'm going to talk about your struggle more than you are going to talk about your struggle, because clearly I understand it better. So I want to talk about family and how you explored it in this book that's different from how you explored it in A Song Below Water, because we got sisterhood and we got found family and missing family. We got a lot of richness in A Song Below Water, and in this one we got to go back a bit. We got to go, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. And we got to do this instead of this.
Right.
If that makes sense visually.
Well, real, literal genealogy and her literal ancestry. And I will say that this book is doing all of the things that we've talked about it doing. And at the same time, this book was just me reveling in my family, in family reunions, in, you know, my experience of coming from a very big family and not knowing who everybody is. And I was like, you know, the only way I would know who everybody is if I was Eloko, because you just say cousin. You go to a big enough, like, listen, I have 8 siblings. My father has 7 siblings. His siblings have 11 kids. So just going to a family reunion is like, it's just a group of people. And I don't know who belongs to who. I'm certain about 6 of my first cousins are actually my first cousins. Other people, I am not sure who they were born to. I am not sure if this is actually a first cousin once removed, or if this is actually a first cousin. Like, I'm not really sure. And I really love, I just remember loving that feeling. You're just surrounded by people and you know it's family, even if you don't know how precisely it's family. And I wanted that to be a part of the magic that she realizes has been sort of kept from her, all while they've been trying to build up this magical identity, and nobody told her what the real magic even was. And especially the poignancy of that as a Black American, where your family history, your genealogy, your family tree was intentionally disrupted, was intentionally torn asunder. And to have this magic ability where you just show up and you know exactly who these people are, you know exactly who's related to you, you know exactly how, and not just biologically, because obviously as Black Americans, found family will always be a big deal. But I loved her realizing that this was a gift that was coming to her. And it also gives her an opportunity, especially as a young person, to recognize that there's something actually bigger than herself. It is important that she loves herself. It is important that she is proud of herself, but it's also important that she realizes that this thing that she experiences when she goes and is around her family is a gift. It's something that the ancestors are giving to her. And it's not just because, Naema, you're dope. It's because this is important for the entire family. And there's a purpose to this magic that has nothing to do with being a social media influencer. I just loved even Courtney, who is my favorite. He's, I'm just obsessed with him. I mean, he's like a mash of mostly my cousin Taylor, to be honest, but like of a couple of my cousins that I got to spend, you know, really like intense time together in our childhood. And I loved being able to show this person who was angry at her. I mean, because when you first meet him, it's very obvious he's got an attitude. He has some resentment. He thinks she's uppity. He calls her Sheba, and also, oh, you're hungry. Let me take you somewhere. I know exactly where to take you. Like, this is family, right? You can be upset. You can have stuff we need to talk about. Okay, but we don't have to talk about this right now because I actually have to tell you something really funny. And I loved showing that relationship, and the best part of my experience of family in this book that was also, like I said, about some pretty traumatic or damaging stuff. She deserves to also be at home. She deserves to also have rest. And her cousin, specifically Courtney, allows that. And the whole family being there allows her to really get a sense of what her magic was actually supposed to be.
You said when you were talking about the family reunion, how you have all these people and you don't know who this is. You think you know all your first cousins. You're not entirely sure. I know exactly what you're talking about. Because then you have those people who walk up to you, and you're like, "You don't remember me, do you? I ain't seen you since you was a baby."
Well,
And
then how am I
you
going to
might
remember
be
you?
like,
Then how am I going to remember you?
you know the answer, but you also know how you're supposed to answer. And it makes me think of not only the familiar connection, but then the connections we were talking about earlier about how protecting other Black women protects you. And there's a line in the book that completely undid me. And you probably know what line it is. I'm going to say the line. And because you just kind of said the line as well. And I want to ask a somewhat selfish question about how this scene came about without going into the scene. But there's a point where Naema, in dealing with family and dealing with ancestors and thinking about you know all that's been happening and who potentially is going to be threatened by these people who have been using her as a shield, other Black women. They've been using her as a shield to go after other Black women, and who she herself was protecting, even though they didn't get along in A Song Below Water. Because, like you said, I don't like you, but I know how people be, so we're going to look out for each other in this regard, at least. The line is, I'm hoping I remember it correctly. Hold on, actually, while I'm sitting here talking about hoping I can remember correctly, let me just scroll up in these text messages, because I came all the way undone, y'all, when I say, and this line, do, 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 do. I just saw the Simpsons thing, but they still belong to us, as in your kinfolk. Like, that's just how it works. That's why we have these terms, kinfolk and skinfolk. And I want to know what it was like coming to that moment that felt like the pivotal moment for me in the book. Because like I said, I came all the way undone. And I'm just asking selfishly, because I know what it was like to read it. I want to know what it was like to write something like that. What's it like to be Bethany C Morrow out here just charming the people and writing these fly books like it ain't nothing?
That moment for me, where Naema, and where the Donna, who is the woman who sort of oversees the network in Portland, where she says they're going to protect. Basically, she's saying we're going to protect these girls whether they're sirens or not, and at the end of the day, they still belong to us. They still, it's a bittersweet thing to say, because as a Black woman, it feels as amorous as anything could possibly feel, and it feeds your soul as soon as you hear it. But you also know that there's a part of the necessity of saying it that's a shared understanding and experience of the fact that if we don't, no one's going to. So there's that, and it's a scene where both of the girls are present, and it had to be real, right? It had to, and this wasn't hard to get to because Naema, like I said, was doing the right thing the whole time. Whether you liked how she did it or not, she was doing the right thing the whole time. So it's not like I had to do this huge evolution of character for her to get to the point that statement means something. But it's asking, and it's another Black woman asking this also, which matters. This is not somebody else saying, you guys have to do better. You have to do better by each other because these are the threats that we face. If it was anybody else saying that, it would be like, how dare you? I am allowed to dislike people. I'm allowed to not get along with people. But because it's another Black woman, and you know the levels of what she's saying, we are hearing all of the meanings in what she says as Black women. She's allowed to ask you to do more. She's allowed to ask you to love better and protect more and have a capacity for empathy that no one else bothers to have for us. So I loved getting there because I didn't actually need Naema to change to get to that moment. I needed the reader to understand what it is to be a Black woman, what it is to have false adoration, what it is to be fetishized, what it is to be blamed for the society that, you know, broke a part of your brain. I needed the reader to get over the BS that they said in response to A Song Below Water, so that you could understand that she understood this sentence before you did.
I mean, that's it right there, is that Naema would have understood, like you said, would have understood this sentence at the beginning of the book because she was already living it and having taken care of somebody that she didn't like. And to your point, through this, like you said, it's not a redemption story. So Naema still doesn't like who she doesn't like, even when the reader comes to this realization that, you know, she's been there the entire time. And I want to talk about redemption arcs a little bit because I have a love-hate relationship with the idea of redemption arcs.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about the fact. I want to talk about the fact that there's a whole swath of people who don't even need redemption arcs. I want to talk about the fact that there is an entire population, the majority of the population, that will headcanon a redemption arc that ain't even happen as long as you're the right kind of character. So,
I mean, you just talked about how they made a whole villain out of this girl who her thing was just not liking somebody that you was supposed. Let me not. Okay.
Look, because I'm like, let's think about, you don't need a redemption arc for. You didn't need a redemption arc for Loki. You didn't need a redemption arc for Killmonger. You didn't need a redemption arc for, you know, there's all of these people who are celebrated, and you will go out of your way to understand them, particularly if you find them attractive. And their society is completely set up to allow for that, right? Like, it's totally, let people like what they like. It's totally fine if the Darkling is your favorite. And the only people who actually need redemption arcs are the ones who usually won't be afforded it. Because when you're saying redemption arc for a Black woman, what you mean is bleed for me. Latrice, you can't just...
Listen, if y'all signed up and didn't know that this was gonna be what happened, it's just me over here of like, yeah. I mean, I'm here to listen to Bethany speak too. I'm selfish. So sorry, you were saying.
I'm just saying, like, as much as I see people trying to misrepresent this as a redemption arc, I already know that if it had been it wouldn't have been enough anyway. If I wanted it to be a
Ooh.
redemption arc, Naema would have had to completely fall apart. She would have had to completely bleed on the page. She would have had to have visible wounds for you to press as frequently as you want to prove to yourself that she deserves, and then therefore should be grateful for your mercy or for your forgiveness. So it's funny because redemption arcs either aren't needed or aren't honored. Latrice?
I'm trying. So
oh my God.
Follow up what you be saying, and my brain just be kicking everything out like I'm useless words. She just said everything perfectly. Why are you even speaking? Is what my brain tells me. So in the book, even Naema says that no, I'm not gonna bleed for you. I'm not gonna break down and do this whole, just weepy McWeeperson in need of defending and protecting. Why does it take me going to this extreme for you to even consider that I need protecting? For you to even consider that I need to be taken care of in some degree? And she's not the one who did the harming, because like you said, it's white supremacy who did it. But in order to just get back to baseline, she has to allow herself to be harmed. She has to put herself in a position where you will see those wounds and, like you said, be able to press your fingers into them. And I love how you have this character, this girl who says, I'm not going to bleed for your benefit, because it's not necessarily for mine. Because whether I bleed or not, there are going to be people who, like you said, it's not going to be enough. I could empty my entire vein and die out here, and you'll still say that, oh, well, she should have had a backup plan. She should have had this together, had that together. So Naema's refusal to even consider a redemption arc, because again, she doesn't need one, ends up with her, how do I say this without talking about what happens in the book? Because I want to talk about old girl who she finds out she has a shared privilege with. And that privilege ends up being what someone wants to use to hurt some other Black girls. And I'm trying to talk in code and I'm failing at it.
Can we talk about that name? The person that you're referring to, Leona Powell, I have a favorite name from each of these books. And my favorite name from the first book was Camilla Fox. I just love the lyricism of it. And then in this book, it was Leona Powell. And I felt like that is the most fantasy name, like the most.
I kept reading it Foul personally.
Yes, of course. Was that accidental? Was that accidental? No, I love.
And she pulls some ridiculousness in the book, and I'm trying not to say what it is, because I could just think. But today, people are finally able to read the book for the first time, and I have to be careful not to give spoilers. And this is a kryptonite for me to try not to give spoilers. So please let us discuss Miss Fowl. I'm not gonna spoil it. I can see the chat.
Danielle's gonna come after me.
Up here struggling. You see me up here struggling. That's why when y'all see me it's because there's a scene that encapsulates the question I'm trying to ask, but I can't talk about it because. So go read it. There should be links in the chat. Y'all go get this book. I'm so serious. Go get this book so I can talk to somebody else about this book. But as you were saying, Leona.
No, so Leona Powell is a white woman who is in Eloko, and she also happens to be a movie producer. And one of the things that's happening that's really turned Naema's world upside down is that in a short year, some streaming platform, who's to say which one, Netflix, but has put together really quickly the story of the awakening and the story of, you know, the Siren who set Portland free. And oh my gosh, aren't we so proud to have our Portland's own, you know, Siren, even though 2 minutes ago we wanted them all physically collared. So Naema still do. I mean, very honestly. So we see Naema looking for ways, because she's Naema. She's not going to go quietly or go cry in a corner about it. She's like, okay, well, I can do that too. Anything you could do, I could do better. So I can tell my story too. And it brings her in contact with a producer who turns out herself to be a Eloko. And this is super duper important because we need to see exactly where this privilege stops. We need to see exactly where this privilege intersects with her, not just her Blackness, but her Black womanness. And the only way to do that is to show a white woman with the same gift and with the same privilege, so that we see it's never the same. It's never the same. And the issue is, the thing that opens Naema's eyes, and this is what really upsets me if people didn't understand this, the thing that ends up opening her eyes is the same thing that always opens any marginalized person, specifically and especially a Black woman marginalized person's perspective of the society, particularly if they've been kind of pro that society. What is going to show you that the lies that you've ingested and believed are not actually true? Well, reality. The crappy part is what reality is for us, like what reality means for us. So this isn't a redemption arc like she bleeds intentionally or bruises or whatever. It's literally, though, a Black girl who previously believed the hype coming into contact with what reality actually is. And that will always be a traumatizing and traumatic experience, because it is always violent and it is always threatening. It's never ideological. It's never going to happen in a sociology forum, in a academic setting or something. This is literally our life. This is our safety, and especially the safety of other people. So yes, she ends up, I can't tell a story about, it's the same way we say don't reduce Black stories down to just pain, or the Black representation down to just pain. But you also, if you're going to try to tell the truth about this world, you also can't erase it and have it be a true story. So the only thing that I can do is put as much love and laughing and enjoyment and self-love and, you know, conceited girl with swag who hair flips and means it, like I put as much of that in there as I can, because I don't get to save Black girls from the world. I don't have that kind of power. If I had that kind of power, this wouldn't be a problem. I could just say, what you believe is what you believe. And I've said this to somebody recently, but it's like Stokely Carmichael said, if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If a white man has the power to do it, it becomes my problem. I can't, by denying it, make it untrue for Black girls. So yes, it has to be involved in her story, not so it can break her, not in it. And I was very mindful of the way that I demonstrated that also, because there is something that is kind of climactic that I didn't put explicitly on the page because of who it would be happening to. And because the point of this is not for somebody to get their lynching postcard and be entertained by our pain. Simply acknowledging the fact that a part of her journey was having to see this country for what it actually is. And that should be indicting, that should be horrifying, that a Black girl has to come face to face with violent misogynoir in order to understand the world she lives in. That's a problem.
Yeah. And man, you do it so well that by the time the reader realizes what it is you've been telling them the entire time, it's already sunk into their head. Like you've already put the lesson you've put the lesson after the test and they don't even know it. Like, you failed the test, so you're gonna get this teaching. I am back and realize that we only have like maybe 4 minutes left for questions. I'm gonna just steal a little bit of time. We have a couple, so I'm gonna ask them. I have a question here that says, you mentioned that one of the male characters was modeled in part by your cousin. Is Naema or any of the other female characters modeled after anyone in your personal life?
So I can't say that I model characters after anybody. The interaction between Courtney and Naema is very much reminiscent of my relationship with my cousin Teule. But if someone were going to say, out of all three of the girls, who do you most relate to? It would be Naema. And I 100%, she goes longer without seeing what's really happening because she believes, because she's a child and she trusts. All I can say is I was a much less trusting child. But I 100% relate to her love of herself and her refusal to give that up or to question that because of somebody else. So yes, the answer is she's modeled on me. No, she's not, but I relate to her. I do relate to her personality.
I totally buy you giving people side eye from the crib. Listen, I believe it. If there were stories about it, I would be like, yeah, that sounds exactly like her. There's another question, and you kind of touched on this already. So it could just sort of be like a sum up. Eloko power seems to be an analogy for white privilege, or just privilege. Can you talk more about that and the complexities of depicting that in Naema's story?
Yes, I will say that it was much more overtly white privilege in A Song Below Water. I remember how many people were like, what do they actually do? It doesn't seem like they really do anything. I would love to know what their power is. I'm like, their power is attributed to them. It's not a power that's ever tested. It's not a power that they ever actually have to display. What does that sound like? So in the first book, it was very explicit that Eloko power, as you see it manifest in Portland specifically, is just white supremacy. Nothing is asked of it. Nothing is, and again, it's attributed. It's power that's given. It's not power that exists. It's not a power that's true. And even in A Chorus Rises, we still do see evidence of that, because she talks about, okay, so she flies down to the Southwest. And then at some point, she invites her ex-boyfriend, Priam, to come and visit. And he is going to arrive the next day. And her cousin Courtney's like, do all y'all just have last minute plane ticket money? Like, why does this keep happening? How are you guys just like going back and forth? And Naema has never really thought about it because their parents have completely different jobs. But she's like, oh, well, I guess I don't really know in a local family that doesn't have all of these other sort of forms of currency and types of currency. And she herself starts to think, but people love Eloko so much that it would only be natural that when you have an Eloko in your family, that people would be more likely to give grace periods or be more likely to give you promotions. So I'm pretty much walking you through the fact that this is just white supremacy. This is just white privilege. And that's why it can be challenged for Naema, because yes, you might have gotten swept up in it. We might have allowed you to be, but at its core, it's white privilege. So we will find a way to exclude you, to kick you out of this, which is obviously what they do in the beginning part of the book. But yeah, I think it's again, it's not difficult for me as a Black American woman to write about white privilege and to break it down, because my life depends on understanding that and identifying that. And also my life also depends on remembering that everybody knows this, and it's just lying when they act like they don't. It's like when people are like, are sundown towns real? And did Tulsa really happen? And I'm like, too many of y'all did it to be acting like you don't know what it is. So that's the other thing, is just remembering that I don't actually have to convince anybody that this is real. They already know this is real. They're intentionally keeping it going. So of course they know it's real. But it's not hard for me. It's not hard for me to write about it because I see it every day.
It's like there's a line in the book that I love where Naema's talking about the privileges with other characters. And she's like, I get these things because I am a Eloko. They don't make me a Eloko. And I'm sitting and like, when I read that line, I was like, that's going to go over so many people's heads. Oh, okay. Last question, and then we'll get out of y'all's hair. It says, what's next for both of you, and what are you reading? I'll answer so that you have the last word in our little discussion here, because we're here about you and Naema, y'all the queens. I don't know what's next for me. I need to look at the calendar. I'm just being honest. I remember.
I know what's next for you.
What is next for me?
Episode 8.
Ma'am, first of all, they don't know what episode.
In public. I'm just coming for you in public.
See, I can't. This is why we can't be together. What am I reading? Well, I'm not reading A Chorus Rises anymore, and I'm still traumatized by the fact that it ended almost 8 pages before the end of the PDF, and there was just 8 blank pages. So I thought there was more of a story, and there wasn't. This is twice that she has done this to me.
It's for fanfic. Actually, those blank pages are where you're supposed to start writing. You know, Danielle, I can see what you're saying.
I have been attacked for 446 pages. I was attacked. But anyway.
What is next for me?
What are you working on? What's next for you? What you reading?
The next thing for me is not what I'm working on, because we know how publishing works. I am far mentally outside of the next book, but my next book comes out in September. It is called So Many Beginnings. Don't say anything, Latrice. It's a Little Women remix. It's part of Powell and Friends, or Powell and Friends. I still don't know how to say my publisher's name, y'all. I'm sorry. Remix classic series. It's about Black sisters, Black March sisters in 1863 in North Carolina. And I am reading, well, I just finished reading Scorpion by Christian Cantrell, which was amazing. And I just picked up The Death of Vivek Oji by Akweke. So I am Akweke Emezi. So I am very excited to finally start reading that.
I can't wait for y'all to see and read So Many Beginnings. That's the other book she used to traumatize me, but we're going to let Powell finish talking.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us tonight, and that great conversation and all that kind of stuff. So thanks so much for that. Please consider purchasing a copy of Bethany's new book, A Chorus Rises, and by visiting us at powells.com. While there, please be sure to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events. And we look forward to seeing you at another one of our events soon. So Bethany, LL, thanks again. Thanks for joining us so much. And everyone have a good night. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.